Welcome to another edition of the Trucking on Route 66 in Missouri Oral History Project, a collaborative initiative between Missouri State University Libraries and OzarksAlive.com. I'm Tom Peters, Dean of Library Services at Missouri State University. My colleague on this oral history project is Caitlin McConnell from OzarksAlive.com. This project is made possible in part by a grant from the Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program of the National Park Service. Today's date is Wednesday, April 4th, 2018. We are in Lebanon, Missouri on this fine but cool spring morning. Our guest today is Don Robinson. You also go by Jack Robinson.
Don is okay.
Okay, Don, thanks very much for meeting with us.
No problem. Glad to be here.
So where were you born?
Oh, Springfield, Minnesota.
Springfield, Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Okay.
Not far from Alden Grove, Minnesota, just like it is here in Missouri.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
25 miles apart.
And what year were you born?
Oh, gracious. 1938.
Oh, good.
I'm going to be 80 here very shortly.
Good. Congratulations.
Thank you. Still feel good.
Well, we're interested in hearing about your life, particularly your years that you were a truck driver.
Okay.
Okay. So tell us, how did you get involved in trucking?
How did I get involved in trucking? Just always liked to go. When I was a kid growing up in Minnesota, we had just a small livestock truck that would only hold about 4 horses, but every time the truck was going to leave, I wanted to be with Dad and go. And I guess that never left me. So I got into trucking in 1960. I quit a job in a bank. Quit a job in a bank in Belleview, Missouri to buy a truck and get rich. Well, it didn't work that way.
So you actually bought a truck to get into the trucking business?
I was 22 years old, didn't have any experience, and you couldn't qualify to go work for anybody, so I bought my own truck.
And you bought a 18-wheeler?
Well, they didn't quite have 18 wheels on them at that time, but I guess that one would have had about 14 wheels.
But it was a tractor-trailer rig?
Tractor-trailer rig, yeah.
New or used?
Used. This was in January 1960. It was a 1957 Ford C800, which was a tilt cab model, a flat nose. You see, used to see a lot of them around and still see a few of them in the fire departments around. Very short wheelbase and wide bodied.
Yeah.
And of course the engines in those years were not much different than what you'd have in the car. This one had a 332 cubic inch V8 Ford in it. And most of your pickups and everything got that bigger engine than that in the pickup trucks.
Yeah. So how'd you get down to Missouri from Minnesota? What brought you to Missouri?
Oh, I think in about 1958, I think my dad was going through his midlife crisis and sold out a livestock auction and a new home, and we bought the biggest mobile home there was to buy, which was 45 by 10, and put it behind a 3/4 ton Dodge pickup truck with a little flathead 6-cylinder motor in it. You couldn't even pull an RV with that today, much less a 45 by 10 mobile home. And there was 7 of us in a 2-bedroom new mobile home, and struck out down the road, and I don't think Dad knew from one day to the next day where we were going, but we ended up in Colorado Springs for a couple of weeks. And Georgia for a few days, and back and forth, and finally found a farm that they wanted around Belleview, Missouri, being about 100 miles south of St. Louis in Iron County. So that's kind of how that all happened. And then I ended up going to work for a bank in there, and then bought a truck, and things went on from there.
All right. So you bought a truck, and you went into business for yourself?
Well, in a roundabout way. You were in business for yourself. It had leased to a company in St. Louis called Hays McClain. That was the steel division. They were also in the regular route freight hauler business of the eastern part of the United States. They had an office in St. Louis right down on the river. And did a little steel hauling back and forth, St. Louis, Chicago, and other places around the country.
So you were hauling steel?
At that time, yeah.
Yeah. So was your truck, did it have a flatbed or?
34-foot flatbed. Today you pull a 53-foot flatbed.
Yeah. And so, in talking to other drivers, I mean, flatbed hauling was a different kind of hauling than reefers or anything like that. So you're kind of limited to the types of things you can haul on a flatbed, right?
Yeah, machinery, steel,
Yeah.
lumber, building products,
Yeah.
a whole lot of stuff on a flatbed.
Yeah.
Actually, doing a reefer trailer too. I did reefer in later years for about 14, 15 years.
Oh, you did do reefers then eventually too?
Yeah, and then back to flatbed again.
Oh, which do you prefer and why?
Well, if I had to do all over again, I'd pull a step deck.
A step, explain to us what a step deck
Well,
is.
you're right at the fifth wheel on your tractor, you're taller, and then you can drop down and your
Yeah.
loading deck is lower, like anywhere from, depending upon the size of your tires, anywhere from 41 inches and lower on the lower deck. So you can haul things that are higher, farm machinery, construction machinery, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I did that in the later years,
Oh,
up until, I guess I did that from about 98 till 2009, I guess.
so you were a trucker for 49
Well, I
years?
had a lot of break in between there.
Yeah,
I
okay.
had a lot of break in between. In 1960, this little Ford truck that I'm talking about, and what a fiasco that was. You couldn't keep it together. And,
I mean, it was constantly breaking down?
Oh, consistently. Electrical problems. The starters, alternators, excuse me, not alternators, generators in those days.
Yeah.
Battery cables, and you name it, just one problem after another, and it wouldn't keep the battery charged.
Oh. And it was your truck?
It was my truck, and so a little 16-year-old kid finally found out what was wrong with it. The ground on it was wrong, and so it couldn't complete the electrical process.
Oh.
So about the time I got that fixed, and got things going a little bit better, and only had that truck about 3 months, and was going to Owensboro, Kentucky. On a Sunday afternoon, was going to go to Owensboro, Kentucky and load, and was right off the Illinois, Kentucky border down around Harris, not Harrisburg, but something close to that, Highway 13. Anyway, just about to meet another car, and there was another car behind that pulled out to pass, and here we come head on at each other. And that was not a good situation there. 6 kids was killed, 14 to 16 years old.
Oh.
And 3 of them went to a grave without their heads. We're talking about a pretty bloody one.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lesson to be learned there too. These kids was 14 to 16 years old. They had just come from the drag races in Sturgis, Kentucky. It was a bright, sunshiny April the 10th day, with the top down on a near new 58 Impala convertible, and 6 drunk kids, enough liquor to get 6 more drunk, and all 6 went to the grave. 2 of them out of the same family.
Really?
So
That's
that kind of
terrible.
ended that with that truck, and a week later I went back to work with the same company and drove another man's truck that was leased to them.
Oh.
And drove it up until October 1960 and got married and got off the road for 20 years.
Oh, okay.
And then that was in October 1960, and then went back again in October 1980. Almost 20, within 10 days of being exactly 20 years.
20 years later.
Yeah, and did that for about 4 months, and that wasn't working, and got off the road again. And then in 1985, I still had the bug to go do it again, and so I bought a 1984 model Peterbilt truck, and I drove it for 24 years on that same truck. Put 3,145,000 miles on that one truck.
3 million miles.
3,145,000 on it when I sold it, and it was still up in top shape. It didn't go to no salvage yard or didn't go to no museum, but stayed out on the road. I haven't been able to contact the man that bought it recently, but if he's still working it like it should be, it could have 4 million on it by now, but I'm not sure. I haven't been able to get in contact with him lately.
Huh, okay.
But it still had the original engine in it. Not that it hadn't been overhauled, but still had the original block and standard, the original crankshaft and standard bearings yet at 3.1 million.
Yeah.
Been a pretty good one.
So what was it about trucking that kept drawing you back? Was it the money? Was it?
Oh, it's not the money.
Huh?
No, it can't be the money. I think you got to have a lot of wanderlust in your blood. Just like a farmer, you take the farmer off the farm and you may put him in the factory for a while, but he'll be back at the farm. I think it's a way of life. It's not an occupation.
Yeah.
You know, if your boss says, well, Tom, you're going to have to work 60-hour days here for a little while, and there's no need in going home. You don't have time to go home. You can sleep in that little cot in the back room. There's no heating, no air conditioner, nothing back there, but you can stay there if you like. And we aren't going to pay you no extra money. You probably wouldn't last that too long. Huh? So it's got to be something you want to do, something that's in your blood to go.
Yeah.
You got to have a little wanderlust and wonder what's around the next curve and around or over the next hill.
Yeah.
And people would say, well, oh, that'd be terrible. You didn't do the same trip every day? Oh, no. For about a period of about 6 years, I kind of did the same trip, but most of the time we run all 48, and every load was different. Every load's going someplace else. You never knew where I was going to go until we got that one off and get on the telephone or the internet and find my own load and go.
So you drove to all of the lower 48.
Oh yeah, and a little bit in Canada, very little, but a little bit in Canada.
What's it like taking a truck into a foreign country like Canada or Mexico? Is it?
Well, if I knew then what I knew now, it'd be a whole lot easier. Going into Canada is not really a big deal. But people say, well, boy, you should want to take a gun with you. Oh, no, you don't. Because you're going to be in big trouble going to Canada carrying a gun. And if you cross into Canada at Detroit, coming across the Ambassador Bridge, and you're making the last curve on the bridge before you come to the inspection station, and there's a sign that says, no firearms. Well, that's a good place for the sign, isn't it? Now, if you need to go leave it at home or get rid of it, what are you going to do now? You're 100 feet from the inspection station.
Yeah. So you just had to know, don't take any firearms.
Just kind of have to know.
Yeah.
And the paperwork is not too bad.
Yeah.
And you got great people.
Yeah.
We spend the winters in South Texas, and we're among a lot of Canadian people, great folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not too bad going to Canada.
Yeah. So you drove for a while in 1960, and then you came back to it in 1980. What did you notice had changed between 1960 and 1980 in the world of trucking?
Well, of course, the trucks were bigger, carried more weight, more comfortable, more amenities. In 1980, the roads was probably rougher than they were in 1960, probably.
Really? Yeah.
Because there had been a lot more traffic in that 20-year period. In 1980, drove for Prime for a while in Springfield. I'm sure you're familiar with them. And all spring ride, no spring ride on the suspension or on the tractor or on the trailer, and everybody run. With Prime, everybody run 2 guys to the truck instead of 1.
Yeah.
They run teams, so the passenger side was just like sitting in the chair that you're sitting in, no suspension of any kind. And if you had anything in your shirt pockets and you hit a bridge approach, and stuff would fly out of your pockets and bounce off the windshield and the back of the floor, and just hit that hard.
Yeah. So when you say spring suspension, and those are they're kind of
leaf springs,
a series of springs.
Right.
And today's trucks have hydraulic suspension.
Air ride.
Air ride. Yeah.
Most of them are nearly everything is air ride in the trucking industry anymore.
Yeah. So you bounced around a lot.
You did. You don't anymore. Anymore, these big truck rides are just about as good as your car.
Yeah.
If I get back on my old Peterbilt that had 3 million miles on it, it'd ride and drive just as nice as this 14 model Dodge van I'm driving out here.
Yeah. Back in 1960, when you started out, the cab didn't have a sleeper in it or anything.
No, it was like a pickup truck.
Yeah.
Straight seat.
Yeah.
Just like a pickup and no bigger engine than what we'd have in a pickup today. It had an Oldsmobile engine.
Yeah.
And the second one, which was a 59 GMC, that's the one that drove after the wreck. And a 5-speed transmission, 2-speed axle.
Mm-hmm.
But no power steering, no air conditioning.
Did you have a radio?
Yeah, but the only time you could listen to the radio was if you're sitting still. Because the engine's too noisy. Even if you turned the volume wide open, you couldn't, you could hear the noise, but you couldn't understand anything.
Yeah.
And of course, no CB radio, no tilt wheel or cruise control or air ride seats. Had vacuum windshield wipers, and on some of them had vacuum brakes instead of air brakes. Those was dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Very dangerous.
A lot of 2-lane road driving, I'm assuming, in 1960?
Most of them was 2-lane. Sometimes you might get real lucky and maybe go load out of St. Louis and go to Chicago and unload and go to Cleveland and unload and come back to Chicago and reload and come back to St. Louis in a week. And if you did that, you bragged to everybody what a good week you had.
Yeah.
It wasn't how much money you had made. Man, we had 4-lane highway all week.
Yeah.
So in '60, about the only 4-lane highways in the Midwest was part of 44. I mean, part of 66, not all of it, but a good part of 66. And across 66 in Oklahoma. But if you got on the other roads, it was rarely any 4-lane at that time.
Yeah.
Kansas did have their toll road going.
Turnpike, yeah.
From Kansas City to Wichita at that time, in '60.
Yep.
And also it was a toll to from Joplin to Oklahoma City. Of course, it still is today.
Yeah.
So there wasn't very few 4-lane.
Yeah.
65 coming out of Springfield, north and south, was horrible. And then down through Branson and Harrison and that type of thing. And then going south of Springfield down through Highlandville and Nixon down that way.
Yeah.
If you were in Branson and you were coming back to Springfield on a Sunday night with all the traffic on the boats, it'd take you 2.5 hours. Branson, Springfield in those days with a car, much less a truck.
Yeah.
So like I say, most of it was 2-lane.
Yeah.
The other parts of the world that were 4-lane was the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It had been in operation since about 1948. And 4-lane from Chicago to Cleveland at that time.
Mm-hmm. So when you took a load up to Chicago, you'd basically take 66 all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, from St. Louis, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any memories of driving along 66 in Illinois?
Oh, I suppose you always had to stop at the Dixie.
Yeah. In McLean?
In McLean, that was the halfway point between, and it still is, it's still operating today. We were by there 60 days or so ago.
I think they might make the claim that they're the oldest continuously operating truck stop in the U.S.
One of them could be.
Maybe.
Could be, yeah.
So that was the place to stop in Illinois, huh? Was it the Dixie?
That was the Dixie. I can't remember too many other places. We stopped a lot in there.
Yeah.
There used to be a little small place, I think, at Litchfield.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm trying to call back here 58 years ago, too.
Yeah. So when you're trucking and you stop at a truck stop, especially in 1960, you check in with your dispatcher or your employer?
You didn't check in as often then as you do now.
Yeah.
Then, we didn't have no 800 phone numbers. So everything was a collect call. So you call and collect and want to speak to Charlie. Well, there was no Charlie. And the guy would say, who's calling? And say, well, Don Robinson's calling. Okay, well, he tell Don to call back in an hour or two. Charlie should be here. Well, that was just a check-in call.
Yeah.
To say that things is okay and so forth, and without having to pay the bill.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, you would, even if if it was Charlie, he would say, Charlie's not here.
Yeah.
Call back in an hour, and you'll say something like, well, I don't really need to, or something. Let him know that everything's okay. And, yeah. All right.
but the other truck stops in those years, in this part of the world, of course, you had the old Thunderbird truck stop in Sullivan, and the Crescent truck stop in Rolla. Of course, in between there you had bosses. My folks used to run the Crescent truck stop in Rolla in 1960.
Oh, really?
Until about 63 or something like that, just a few years. Give you an idea how what a difference made in the highway. This old truck stop was right at the junction of 66 and 63 in the north of Rolla. Okay. And the people that used to run that place, and before Interstate 44 was built, that place would do 100,000 gallons of fuel and only had 4 pumps. And it was all gas, there was no diesel pumps.
Really?
Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
When did diesel come in?
Well, we took the place over in November of 60, it was still all gas there. And Dad finally got one diesel pump put in. There were still diesel trucks on the road, but not every station had the diesel. I don't suppose that that got real popular until into the 70s.
I did not know that.
Into the 70s, yeah.
So most of those early trucks were gas.
A good part of them were.
Yeah.
There was a few Cummins around, and a few of the old Detroits around, and a few of the Macs. But they weren't that popular yet.
Yeah.
And of course, in those days, diesel fuel was 11 cents a gallon. Now today, Missouri's got some of the lower tax rates on the fuel.
Right.
Missouri's in the lower ones. I can only think of Indiana's 16 cents and Missouri's at 17.
Yeah.
Your old state of Illinois is like 36.
Yeah.
You know, so you have that on your state tax plus today.
Yeah.
Let me backtrack. Like 1960, you could buy diesel fuel for about 11 cents at the pump. Okay. And that included the tax. Well, today we've got here in Missouri, as again I said, one of the lower states, at 17 cents on the state plus 24.2 on the federal. Okay.
Yeah.
So back to the truck stops, because that station that we had would do 100,000 before we bought it, and then after the highway changed, we'd get down to about 8,000. So how we made that much difference?
From 100,000 to 8,000
Yeah.
gallons a day. Because you were just in the wrong location at that point when I-44 came through.
Yeah, it would have been a month, not a day. Did I say a day earlier?
Oh yeah, a month.
Yeah. So no.
So a real big drop.
Oh yeah. So the highway made a big difference then when it changed.
Yeah.
So then coming this direction, you're going back out west, and the other truck stops would have been the T&T at Doolittle, and then the Midway out here at Sleeper. I guess it's still there. And then the garbage can at Niangua. Springfield, Seven Gables.
Yeah.
I can't remember too much from there on west. Not any particular ones, but
yeah.
And very few of them had a shower. Those that I mentioned, most of those all had a diesel pump. The majority of those did, I'm thinking, but we was driving gas trucks, so I didn't pay that awful much attention.
Yeah.
But
and how'd you pay for the gas?
all cash. All cash.
No credit cards back then?
No credit cards, no fuel cards.
Yeah.
The only money transfer you had was Western Union. So that's a good question you got there. So you get ready to make a trip, and then you make tell the dispatch you need about a $75 advance for maybe a 500-mile trip. About $75 to run that maybe. And then if you started getting close on money, you may have to call dispatch and say, hey, I gotta have another 25 or another 50 or something like that. And they say, where do you want it sent to? Well, let's send it to Western Union, Richmond, Indiana. We'll be in Richmond in a couple hours.
Yeah.
And so of course, the Western Union store was always right downtown.
Right, I was going to say, it's kind of tough to get a big rig into a Western Union.
No, so you find some place that you can park and unhook your trailer and bobtail down to the Western Union shop and sit there for a couple hours waiting for it to come in, and then go back and get hooked up again.
How'd you prove a driver's license? Would that be good enough to collect a Western Union money order?
Yeah, of course, in those years, Missouri didn't have your picture on your driver's license either in those years.
Right.
Yeah. And then, of course, you end up having to pay the fees for the Western Union, so, and then about all your fuel was cash, and then usually when you could pull in the truck stop, you could usually get 2 cents a gallon discount on truck over car fuel.
Oh, really?
It's a little different than it is today with you.
They gave you a sort of a volume discount for a trucker?
Yeah. Come back and see us again for a free cup of coffee and 2 cents off your gas.
Yeah. And it used to be, I don't see it much anymore, but it used to be, back when credit first came in, if you paid cash, you get a little bit of a discount too, as opposed to put on a credit card. But you don't see that much anymore.
Well, you still can. If you notice some of the signs at your Pilots and the Lowe's, you'll see 2 prices.
They'll flash back and forth, cash, credit.
About 6 cents difference.
Yeah. So back to the truck stop. So what differentiated a good truck stop from a not so good truck stop?
Maybe a little bit of groceries. Yes, one big thing. Now, they got showers in that place over there.
So having showers.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if they had a shower, and some of them had truckers' bunks upstairs. Maybe just a big dormitory with a bunch of Army fold-out cots, and that was about maybe $1 a night. So that was a good place to stop. You could get a shower and get a bunk, so you didn't have to sleep across the bench seat in your truck and get.
I was going to ask you. So back in 1960, if you were driving all the way to Cleveland, where would you spend the night?
In the truck.
Sleeping in the truck, and you couldn't even put the seat back. It was.
Well, you can put your seat back, but that wouldn't do much good. They curled up in the seat, and then some of them that had the individual seats, like the bucket seats. Yeah. Some of the guys would just take a box or something and put in between there, or a pad of some kind, and sleep across that.
Sleep across.
Not very comfortable.
So there's another question for you. So back in 1960. Typical truck cab didn't have bucket seats, it had just a bench?
Well, dependent.
Yeah.
Dependent. Most good part of your gas burners had just a bench across. A lot of the diesels may have had an air seat on some of them.
Yeah.
And 2 seats across, but some did and some didn't.
You know, today's young people might not realize it. On most passenger cars, as I think back, didn't have bucket seats. They had benches.
That's right.
Station wagon would have 3 benches, and a typical sedan would have 2 benches.
Yeah. Carry 6 people in the car. Now you can carry 4.
Right. Did you ever haul anything all the way to the West Coast down to LA and?
Not at that time. Not in 1960.
But later.
And later, I went to California a whole bunch and. Haul various products to California and reload produce and come back to all points in the Midwest or the East Coast, or may load in California and go to New York or Boston, Philadelphia, whatever, all the way across.
With produce?
Yeah.
Another driver just told me that was the hauling produce back from California was the money run. That was better money than hauling boxed meat or swinging meat or whatever.
I've heard stories like that. I never made much money hauling produce. And looking back, I thought, why would a man in his right mind do that? And I did it for 16 years.
Really?
On the produce. And I finally got smart and got out of that. That's a horrible way to make a living.
Yeah. Well, tell us more about that. So you'd pick up a load, some kind of refrigerated load. Might be frozen or refrigerated meat or something, or
going to California.
Going to California. What would you haul out?
Various things. You might haul refrigerated. You might haul some dry freight of some kind.
Oh, really?
We hauled some frozen bread products. Frozen bakery products would be a better description.
Doughs and things.
Yeah. Frozen bread dough and cookies and cake and that type of thing.
Yeah.
But the downside of the produce was you got unloaded in LA, and it's 370 miles up to Salinas, which is pretty well the breadbasket of the United States in the produce world. And so you'd make a few calls and find a load, and the dispatch would say, you got a good place to write this. Big piece of paper? Okay, so you're gonna go to, I'm just gonna make up a name here, ABC Packing, and you're gonna load 4 pallets of naked lettuce. And then you're gonna go to Fresh Express, I'm gonna load
Now, naked lettuce is 24 heads in a carton,
ready to go.
just not wrapped,
Not
just
wrapped.
naked out of the field.
Right, no, you're right, you got it. And so then you go here and get some broccoli, and over there and get some carrots or whatever.
Yeah,
And you end up with 4 to 6 places to load,
yeah.
and you get in the extra money for the extra pickups. No, you're hauling produce, you don't get paid like that. And so you get up to Salinas and you call and say, I'm supposed to pick up order number such and such going to Buffalo, New York. Is it ready? And you hear some guy in the background, he. And say, what's so funny? And he says, you ask if it's ready, it's still in the field. And you say, still in the field, I'm supposed to be in Buffalo Sunday night at midnight. Well, sorry about that, driver, it's still in the field. So then you call some of the others and see what's ready to load. Well, that's always fun.
Yeah.
So you got this pressure on your mind that you already got a delivery appointment to deliver at Buffalo, New York.
And it's all on you, the driver.
Yeah, and here the product is still in the field. It hasn't even been harvested yet. And you put up with that. And you may go into Salinas and you got no truck parking signs all over town, even though you got great big wide streets, no amenities to speak of. At any one shipper, there may be 40 trucks sitting outside to load it at any one dock. And I couldn't tell you how many docks there would be in Salinas, but a bunch. So you got that pressure on your head all the time. You got to go, and nobody's cooperating.
Yeah.
And then you get to the other end, and they put the rush on you all the way through, so you drove 700 to 800 miles a day to get there. And then somebody wants to charge you to come into the gate to unload their product.
Really?
Oh yeah.
There's like an unloading fee.
Not necessarily an unloading fee, just to get on the property.
Really?
Now we may have another fee to get unloaded. Yeah, oh, it's a wonderful world. That hauling produce is just a wonderful world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine I did that for 16 years.
So you did that
Most of my
throughout the
time.
80s?
Did that what?
When did you do that? 80
In the
to
80s,
80
yeah.
to 95 roughly?
Yeah,
Or?
85 to 98, I guess, on that produce.
Yeah.
And then I said 16 years, I guess it'd be 13 years.
Yeah. But you did that, and that's pretty much exclusively what you did for those 13 years?
A lot, not exclusively, but
A lot of it was?
if you're gonna haul irregular like that, you rarely haul exclusively. You just,
Yeah.
It's kind of whatever you can load and wherever it goes usually.
Yeah. And who were you working for during those years?
I was leased to a company in St. Louis called Transcontinental Leasing, which was part of Wetterall Food, which was later bought out by Super Value in Minneapolis.
Uh-huh.
And then worked with Deaton and Malone from Birmingham, Alabama for a little while.
Uh-huh.
Finally just couldn't handle any more of that, and so I applied and got my own operating authority and run under my own company instead of being leased to them. It was totally independent at that time.
Just a single driver?
Yeah. And then I ended up with, did something else that wasn't too smart either. I ended up with 5 of them things.
Oh.
I ended up with 5 of them pulling refrigerated trailers, and so then drove one myself and had tried to keep 4 drivers on the others.
Yeah.
Not a good experience at all. Just
Was that a big headache?
Oh, terrible headache. Everybody says, well, these drivers tear up your truck. Well, I don't think I could ever come up with a driver who had enough ambition to tear up a truck. And nobody wanted to work.
Really?
And it was just a nightmare. Another fellow gave me an awful good piece of advice one time before I bought any extra trucks. and he had 8 or 10 trucks hauling mail. So he had his trucks on a routine haul where he knew where they were and what was going on every day. And he was still having trouble, but he gave me some awful good advice, but I was way smarter than he was, you know. I think of the expression, don't confuse me with the facts when my mind is way made up. But this man said, he says, you go buy all the trucks that you want to buy, but don't ever buy more than you can drive yourself. Ooh, I heard that in the back of my mind for 2 million miles. I thought, ooh, why didn't I listen to that old man? He was a pretty smart fella.
Yeah.
So I finally got rid of the others in 1998. So, yeah, 98, I guess, when we got rid of the others and kept the same one that I'd started with. And an old girlfriend says, you know, since you got rid of them old trucks, you ain't a bad guy to be around me. Before that, you was terrible. I can imagine I was.
It was affecting your whole life.
Oh, of course it was. You know, you're just grouchy all the time and too much pressure.
Yeah.
But,
so you think of all the different ways that you've driven, being an independent driver, owner operator, is that what they call them?
Oh, yes.
That was the best.
Oh, yeah, by far.
Yeah.
By far.
Now, back in the 60s and the 80s, I don't know if the regulations were more lax or if the enforcement was more difficult, but you mentioned driving 700-800 miles a day kind of situation. I mean, now I think they say you have to be down 8 or 10 hours every 24 hours, something like that.
Yeah, that's changed a little bit. Of course, we had those regulations in those years too.
Yeah.
10 hours. Drive 10 and be off 8.
Oh, that was the rule.
Yeah, but those with a piece of paper and pencil, you could get creative. And I've been called in the funny book or the liar's law or whatever you wanted to call it. But the regulations were in effect, but they were somewhat enforced.
Yeah.
Just tried not to get caught.
Yeah.
And even back in the 80s, a logbook violation in California was about $800.
Really?
In the 80s.
Yeah.
So as of January the 1st of this year, and it took 1999 and newer, it all had all the electronics on, electronic ignition and onboard computers. So
Right.
now it's all paperless logs as of January 1st of 18.
And no, they know where every darn truck is every moment.
Well, they can track it up. You can't track it all anymore.
Yeah.
So it's probably better in the end. It take a lot of stress out of the industry.
Yeah.
Take a lot of stress out of the driver. But the next thing that there's got to be, in order for that to work, there has to be better cooperation with the shipper and the receiver.
Yeah.
This sitting in the dock for 8 or 10 hours to get loaded or unloaded, it has to stop.
Yeah.
You cannot go.
That was one of the worst parts, was just waiting around to get loaded, get unloaded.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Independent Owner Operator Association in Kansas City, commonly known as OOIDA.
Yep, I've been up there.
Jim Johnson was the one that started that in 1973. Sat across the table from Jim Johnson a few times in business meetings in Vegas several years ago. And they tried to do a study back, I suppose it's been 20 years ago now, but they figured that the average guy pulling refrigerated trailers spent 40 hours a week at the dock that he did not get paid for. They didn't get paid for.
Yeah.
Okay? So now how many hours are you going to have to work to make a living? You've already given away 40.
Yeah.
So now if you only work another 40, that puts you at 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
And lots of weeks I thought I wished I could have got by with 80 hours, been happy with 90 or 100.
Yeah. Tough on your health overall?
Well, I don't have no problems, but it can be.
Yeah.
I think we got tough on the health as these people got into the drugs and so forth to stay awake.
Yeah.
I think that's the people that have health problems.
Yeah.
Never did that. Never did that.
Coffee? A lot of coffee?
Oh, everybody drank a little coffee, but I don't know if coffee hurting is too bad.
Yeah.
too much truck stop groceries and get to looking fat like I am. That didn't help him probably, but
Yeah, tough to eat well.
yeah, I suppose. But I haven't had no health problems to speak of.
When you were going all the way to going out to California doing the produce run, were there other truck stops along the way that were kind of, you'd stop more often than not? So I've heard from other drivers out of Missouri that there was one on the west side of Tucumcari, New Mexico, that they'd often stop at.
Yeah, it's all closed up now. Called Triple T, Tucson Truck Terminal, not Tucson. Tucumcari Truck Terminal. Yeah. Exit, 154 or something like that.
So I'm thinking you stopped there quite often.
Yeah, I stopped there. That was always a pretty good stop.
Yeah.
But it's all closed up.
Yeah, and then others have said there was one in Holbrook,
Yes.
Arizona.
I have that on my list there. Holbrook, a good spot.
Was a good truck stop?
Good spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where was it in Holbrook? I was just in Holbrook. When I drove out to Phoenix, and I was looking for that old truck stop. And was it on the west side of Holbrook?
No, more toward the east side, exit 292.
Uh-huh.
Exit 292.
Was it, now with I-40, you kind of come out of Old Holbrook, and then there's a big long strip of motels and gas stations and things. And then you get on the interstate if you want to that way too.
Yeah.
Was that where it was up in there? Kind of that high ground above, right up north of Holbrook? I'd call it north of Holbrook, northeast of Holbrook maybe. I was looking for it, I couldn't find it.
I remember the exit. I remember what it looked like. It seemed to be like it was on the. Of course, when I was there now, we're talking on I-40 at that time.
Yeah.
The 66 is, off the road.
Yeah.
Driving there.
Yeah.
About as far as I ever got out west in 60 on the old highway was about Albuquerque.
Yeah.
But even at that time, even in this jump to I-8 to, like the 60s, let me back up, 44 wasn't completed in Missouri until the last section maybe about 72, 73 at Devil's Elbow. Mm-hmm. That was the last section of Missouri. Mm-hmm. And it was about 81 or 82 in the Texas Panhandle around Pampas and McLean and that area.
Yep.
And then I think in Arizona, about Williams, Arizona, and that was maybe about 83 or 4, I think, before that was completed. When 66 was still running there yet.
Yeah. So let me ask you about that. So there was, a considerable number of years where the idea of an interstate, a network of interstate highways, limited access highways, the plan was in place, but it took years
Well, I think that's
to complete the whole interstate network. Was that a real problem when you had to, get off and?
Oh, it was not big a deal. Just it was usually easy enough to jump off from the old highway to the new highway, just like you're into construction today.
Yeah.
That wasn't no big deal, but on the beginning of the interstate highway system, I think we have to give old Dwight Eisenhower credit for that, don't we?
Yeah.
And when he came up with that, about 52 in that area.
It wasn't too long after the Second World War that the idea of an interstate highway system.
So he's traveling across the country with a bunch of troops and thinks this is too slow, and what would we do in wartime?
Yeah.
So I think I looked at something on the internet there last night since I knew you were coming.
Yeah.
It looks like they started 66 in the 11th day of November 1926.
Yeah, that's when the federal government approved the numbering scheme.
Yeah, 26 it says.
Yeah.
2,451 miles from Santa Monica to Chicago.
Yeah.
But this younger generation seems to be under the misconception that all the ballyhoo that they'd heard about Route 66, the younger generation seemed to think this was some kind of a big super slab, in truckers' terms, all across the country.
Yeah.
Well, I said, if that's true, I wonder what happened to it. I mean, a lot of it wasn't even paved until the end of the 30s.
Yeah, it took a long time to get the whole thing
paved until the end of the 30s.
Yeah.
And
do you ever drive a considerable length of time on gravel or dirt?
Not, no,
Yeah.
no, that would have been long gone.
Yeah, by the time you were
Oh,
trucking
no,
it, yeah.
that'd been long gone by that time. But there's a lot of difference in the equipment too.
Yeah,
You know, it's got a small engine with, like I said, with no smaller transmissions and smaller tires and don't have the comfort amenities. And
yeah,
now these guys got tilt and cruise and satellite radio and a DVD player and a
Yeah.
CB radio and a
Yeah.
60-inch bunk with a refrigerator.
refrigerator in there,
And
yeah.
a microwave and a heating and air, an onboard heating and air conditioning system, and
Yeah,
it's pretty comfortable in today's times.
yeah, it's almost like a Rolla, it's like a mobile home, basically,
Well,
that's
yeah.
what it is, yeah.
And then you get on some of these old roads and think, this is what these guys drove on?
Yeah,
With
and the roads were narrower too.
Oh, well, that's a good point, and I had that road on one of my things here.
Yeah.
This old 66 through this part of the country had a lip on the road.
Yeah,
That had a lip, and where it was really dangerous was down around, I mentioned Devil's Elbow earlier, around Devil's Elbow that was pretty bad, because you had a center median there. You had a curb in there, a grassy curb in there that was maybe 3 or 4 feet wide,
yeah.
and there was no such thing as a shoulder. There was a road and a curb.
Oh, so if you broke down,
I'm talking, let me backtrack a little bit on what I said. To the right side, you could have had a small shoulder. To the left side, you had none, just a curb.
Yeah,
And that got pretty narrow, and we had some turns there too around, that's why they called it Devil's Elbow.
right,
And of course, that's where the river turned in there too.
yeah,
And across Oklahoma from Joplin to Oklahoma City, all had that curb in there too.
Yeah.
Which was,
I've heard from other drivers, you know, the curb was bad, but also you get down to the bottom of the hill and then kind of a culvert would, so the curb would drop down so that the water could flow out.
Yeah.
And boy, if you got up on that curb and then you hit that thing,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, if you did that, yeah.
it was a bad
That
situation.
slowed you around pretty good.
Yeah,
Another dangerous spot was over by Jerome, Missouri. After you cross the Gasconade, and you're on the old highway now. And then there was this, after you cross the river, you're going uphill a little bit, and then there's about a 35-mile-an-hour sharp curve, and then back again, a dog-leg curve in there.
yeah,
Well, you didn't have too much danger of missing that curve because you had a great big rock wall that would stop you. There were a lot of accidents on that rock wall. Cars and trucks would come in there too fast and lose it on that turn and come right into that rock wall.
yeah,
A lot of people were killed right there.
really. Did you see a lot, I mean, you mentioned the car full of drunken teenagers. Did you experience a lot of accidents in your years of trucking?
Oh, that, you know, it seems strange. They kind of run in cycles. I've seen as many as 4 or 5 in a day.
Really?
And there's been other times you may drive for a month and never see one.
Huh.
But oh yeah, and some of them you'd shake your head and say, what happened?
Yeah.
I could sit here and tell you about a few of them and say, what happened here?
Yeah,
How about when it's a sunshiny afternoon, weather is good,
yeah,
traffic is normal, you're on Interstate 81 just south of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and there's a truck laying on its side in the traffic lane, no other cars involved.
really.
How does this happen? It's flopped over on the side.
Think the driver fell asleep?
Don't know. Don't know. Of course, you don't always know what happened, you know.
Yeah.
But, you see some strange ones.
Did you drive at night quite a bit?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Did you prefer that to driving during the day, or?
Probably not. A lot of guys do. They say, well, it's cooler and your truck runs cooler and your tires last longer and you don't have the traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you still got the animals on the road and you still got the drunks.
Yeah.
I would prefer the day, but most of the time you drove whenever you had to. You
Yeah.
drove 20 hours a day and sleep 4.
Yeah.
And that was pretty common. So you drove the day out or the night, whatever you had to do.
Yeah. Especially with the produce.
Yeah. Oh yeah, produce is always 2 time sensitive.
Yeah. Did you ever have to top ice a lot of that stuff?
Oh yeah.
And you'd have to stop and re-ice during the trip?
Usually not. Usually not, but in the older years you did. Before they had the better refrigeration units, you used to call them a bunker, because this is before my time now. And they put the top ice on them and just let that melt down, and that's what cooled the load, and that's what had to try to keep it cool. But a lot of times maybe the product was a little bit warm when they loaded it in more later days, like into the mid and late 80s.
Yeah. Especially if it came fresh out of the field, it was probably pretty warm.
Some of it was a little warm, and that's when they put the top ice on. And you get that moisture down through there, and then it would also help the refrigeration unit. So that was pretty common on the top ice, yeah.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we usually didn't have to stop and put any more on. That was normally sufficient. But earlier years, you'd ice all the way across from what I'm told. But like I say, that was before my time.
Yeah. Did you normally drive alone, or did you drive as a team?
Most of the time alone.
You prefer that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Much better.
Yeah.
You got two personalities. Just like husband and wife, you can have two personalities. And that old Peterbilt truck I had, the old Peterbilts always had a small cab on them in the first place. And different guys would get up on my truck, I'd look and say, how in the old world do you drive this little tiny thing? So I don't have no problems. I drove it for 24 years and owned 4 of them just like it. But I could spread my fingers and touch both seats.
Really?
That's close, right?
That's how close it
It's
is.
close.
Yeah.
The Kenworth and Freightliner and International had a much wider cab than the Peterbilt had.
Yeah. But you prefer Peterbilt?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. They're pretty nice truck. Of course, Kenworth is nothing wrong with them either, you understand.
Yeah.
But a little nicer quality.
Yeah.
Just a little nicer quality truck, kind of like a Cadillac or Lincoln compared to a Ford or Chevrolet.
Yeah.
But the team driving, people say, well, you know, one guy can drive 700 miles a day, but 2 guys drive 1,400 miles a day. No, that don't happen that way. It don't work that way. 2 guys might do 1,000, 1,100 a day, maybe 1,200 if things is good.
Yeah.
But the next thing you got is trying to go back there in that bunk and rest when you're sitting there bouncing down the road, and especially on the older trucks with the spring ride. And some of the roads weren't as good as they are today. A lot of the guys complain about the roads today being rough, and a lot of them are getting rough, but they're less smooth than they were 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Of course, too, we've got a lot better riding trucks than we had 25 years ago. That's a lot of it.
Yeah.
But to go back there and sleep 8 hours, you just about have to be drugged up to do that.
Yeah.
4 hours.
Yeah.
If you get back there and sleep 4 hours, say, man, I had a good rest.
You're doing well. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're better off by yourself. You actually.
Now today, are most
Pressure.
truckers, they're sort of independent truckers now, right? I mean, they're running their own rigs, or?
Well, a lot of them are. A lot of them are driving company trucks. Just depend upon whose name is on the door.
Yeah.
If it says,
Which do you prefer of those?
oh, I wouldn't.
Owner operator?
I would much rather drive my own as I would company truck.
Yeah.
I've always got, my dad always said, if you can make a living for somebody else, you can surely do it yourself. So, guys say, well, I can go over here and I can drive so-and-so's truck and I don't got to worry about it, and I can make just about as much money as I can to have my own.
Yeah.
And that's probably true.
Probably true.
So far as what you're going to put in your pocket on a daily basis or a weekly basis.
Yeah.
But when it comes to that old truck is paid for,
Yeah.
then who owns it and what's it worth?
Maintaining it.
Yeah. So, depend upon what you got and how nice your truck is, what kind of miles, what kind of amenities. Well, a 5-year-old truck may be worth anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000, depending upon what you got. So, to me, that's your savings account, or that's your bonus or your profit, whatever your equipment is worth at the end.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like buying a home or buying a house and renting it out. Well, you're probably not going to put nothing in your pocket until it's paid for,
Yeah.
over and above your payment, insurance, and your maintenance costs.
Right.
About the same thing on a truck.
Right.
All you're going to make is a driver's wage, and if you hire a driver and put on it and expect any profit off of it, you might as well, in my opinion, you might as well forget that.
Yeah.
Some of these bigger companies may get, of course, they're doing it on a larger basis, different than, which would not which would not add up to what I just said.
Yeah.
But then they're getting a break in the fuel, they're buying the truck cheaper.
Yeah.
And there's nobody taking a percentage of their freight, whereas if you're an owner-operator and you're going through a broker or you're leased to a company, somebody's taking 22 to 25% off the top.
Yeah.
So there's the difference there with those guys.
Yeah. So kind of either you're an independent owner-operator or you're working for a really big outfit that can sort of absorb some of those costs. We haven't talked about weather at all. So, what were I'm assuming snow was the worst.
Yeah, snow and ice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So certain places you don't want to go. You stay out of Colorado,
Yeah.
stay out of Idaho and
Yeah.
Montana and Wyoming.
Even I-40 has, places
I-40
about
to Pleasant.
7,000 feet.
Well, you get out to Flagstaff, and you're about 8,600.
Yeah.
And then you got a long grade from there going west there for, 12, 15 miles. You got a pretty good grade, and that'd get pretty bad in the wintertime.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about grades. I think, I think the highest grade I've seen recently is 7%.
That's pretty steep.
Did you have steeper grades?
I have, but not very often. Uniontown, Pennsylvania, on the old Highway 40. Of course, we had 40 go through St. Louis, Kansas City area.
Yeah.
I'm talking US 40, not Interstate 40.
Right.
There's 10% grade there.
Really?
Yeah.
Pretty tough for a loaded truck to get
Yeah,
up
it's
there.
pretty steep.
Yeah.
Very steep, but it's short. It's only about 2 miles, maybe 2.5 miles.
Yeah.
But most of them that you'd encounter in today's times are not going to exceed 6%. There are a few, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, 5 and 6.
I've seen a few 7s
Once in a while.
today, so,
Once in a while.
don't last very long.
California, there, the old grapevine, that's a nasty thing.
The grapevine?
Yeah.
Tell us about the grapevine.
It's on Interstate 5 between Los Angeles and Bakersfield. And California's got a speed limit on it, I think even coming down is like 25 or 35 mile an hour even on the way down, even if you're empty.
Really?
Which is kind of ridiculous, but how it goes there. But that's pretty nasty up and down. And you got cabbage and called cabbage. Of course, the local people call it the blues in Pendleton, Oregon. That gets pretty nasty.
Yeah.
And of course, you got Black Mountain in North Carolina, and you got Donner Pass in California.
Yeah.
Snoqualmie in Washington, Cajon in Southern California. There's a lot of nasty passes.
Yeah.
But really nasty back in the days of in the 70s and prior with the smaller engines, and that's not always the factor either. Then you got to come down, and without an engine compression brake that we call a Jake brake.
Jake brake, yeah.
Of course, the only reason we call it a Jake brake was it was manufactured by Jacobs Engine Company, so that's where the name Jake brake comes from. But Clessy Cummins is the one that designed that brake. And Clessy Cummins being the founder of Cummins Engine Company, Columbus, Indiana. He's the one that founded that brake, but the board of directors and everybody within the company was leery about putting that brake on their engine for causing problems.
So how does that brake work? I've never, is it?
Kind of instead of turning your engine into a power unit, it turns it into a compressor.
Yeah.
By holding the valves open or closed.
So you're not, and so that's what that noise is the compression being released.
Right, that's right, you're holding the exhaust.
Yeah.
Holding the exhaust back, and that does a fantastic job. But what happened there with Cummins, like I said, the Cummins people were afraid that could damage their engine. That's how it got let out to Jacobs, from what I understand.
Oh.
So by having a third party on there, somebody else had the liability. So if things go bad, well, man, them guys out there in Connecticut messed up.
Yeah.
That's what I'm understanding.
Really?
Well, my wife that you met here a little bit ago worked for Cummins in the office there for 26 years.
But as it's played out, Jake braking is not harmful to the engine.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And it's a good strategy.
Yes.
And the only downside is the noise.
Yeah.
You see a lot of towns that'll have a sign at the edge of town, no jake brake.
And if everybody just leave their standard mufflers on, we wouldn't have the signs, because it wouldn't be that noisy with the standard muffler, but these guys think they want to put a set of straight pipes on where they rattle, and then have to listen to that all the way going down the road. It might be okay for the first 5 miles, and after that, I don't think so. I just get the roar in your ears after a while.
Yeah.
In fact, on my truck it was pretty quiet, but you'd have a Y pipe underneath because you got a 6-cylinder inline engine, and so you got one pipe coming out and then into a Y, and the duals went up. And I was having too much maintenance problem with that, so I just did away with that and just run it off on the right side.
Yeah.
But the stack was still on the left side where it still looked nice and was still balanced.
Yeah.
But that made it quieter too, just putting it on the other side of the cab, away from the driver's ears.
Yeah.
But too many guys are just playing with those things and make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
But that was a tremendous safety factor. That brakes are a tremendous safety factor. Otherwise, your brakes get hot. When your brakes get hot, they fail.
Yeah.
And you don't have low brakes.
Yeah.
Been there and done that.
Yeah, really? You had your brakes fail?
I lost my brakes off in Mount Eagle in Chattanooga in 1960 with that little Ford truck.
Yeah.
And of course, you didn't have those kind of brakes on a gas engine.
Yeah. And I'm guessing back in 1960. Now a lot of places, they have, what do they call those? Truck turnoffs, where if you can't slow down.
Right, you
you
still
go.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But back then they probably didn't have as many of those.
You know, there was some, but not as many as we have today, but there were some.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing.
Yeah.
These things can still happen, they still get out of control even today. You know, and too, if you really stop and think about what's keeping that jake brake working, all you got some little tiny 20 amp fuse. That's all you got. That little tiny 20 amp fuse burn, you got no jake brake. And on your air system, all you got is a little piece of rubber. And the line is not much bigger than my little finger. That line busts, and then your diaphragm and your brake system is just a piece of flat rubber, no no heavier than an inner tube in a bicycle.
Yeah.
It's the bladder in there,
Yeah.
and if that gets a hole in it, you lose your pressure alarm.
You got no brakes.
So there's not a lot there.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get to thinking about all those things when you're loaded heavy and you're coming off the mountain and you're watching your gauges and you're watching your pressure and you're watching your oil temperature and you're watching your coolant temperature and you're watching all these things and you're watching your mirrors and we got any smoke and then you get to thinking about what's holding you here.
Yeah.
So all those things kind of gets you to wondering sometimes.
Yeah. Back to the truck stop. So your parents owned or ran a truck stop for 3 years?
They leased one there for about 3 years.
They leased it?
The Crescent truck stop in Rolla has been torn down now.
Yeah. What were their memories of that? I mean, was that a good experience for them, running a truck stop for 3 years?
The service station part of it, no, was a money loser. The restaurant did okay with the restaurant. Had quite a little local traffic. If we depended strictly on the road traffic and on the truck traffic, probably would have been pretty tight.
Yeah. But it was a restaurant in town in Rolla.
Yeah. It was. My mom ran a pretty good show. She ran a pretty good restaurant. Most of the truck traffic we had was routine. Study hall guys. Of course, you had the oil terminals in Jeff City, hauling gas and propane, and coming back 63 down through Rolla and Licking and Salem and Houston and West Plains, Willow Springs, all those places.
So you get a lot of regulars, a lot of
those guys was regulars. Yeah.
And your mom sort of ran the restaurant?
Yeah.
And your dad ran the fuel side of it?
Yeah. We tried to run both of them 24 hours, and that's a hassle too.
Really? Drunks after 2 and that kind of stuff?
You know, Yeah, not too much problem with the drunk.
College kids, I remember when I was in college going to the truck stop at 3 in the morning. When it was,
Once in a while. Where were you at then?
I was in Iowa.
In Iowa.
Yeah, I was up in Iowa on I-80. We'd actually go. We'd go to truck stops. Yeah.
I-80, been in several of them on 80 across Iowa in my days.
Yeah.
But like I say, a lot of times those things change and roads change and these buildings are tore down and the people that owned them got out of business and died or whatever.
But overall, it was a good. They had fond memories of the 3 years that they operated a truck stop.
Yeah, it was okay. But
And when I-44 come through Rolla, is that what kind of killed it? Or?
oh yes. And that must have come through, been completed, I don't know, maybe 58 or 9, maybe someplace in there. We were there in 60, and the interstate was through then. It was in November of 60.
That's when they started operating the truck stop?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so 44 was completed through there then.
Did you and your family know how big of an impact that was going to have on the local business?
Well, when we took it over, the impact had already happened.
Yeah.
So
you knew what?
Yeah, we could see by the other people's sales about what to expect.
Yeah.
Then the service station was not good. The restaurant had to support the service station if you really got down to it. If you paid yourself the salary out of the station, you couldn't keep it above board.
Yeah.
Just not enough. And then you had local people wanting to charge the gas.
Yeah.
You know. And of course, at that time, a guy pulled in and said, put in $2 worth. Well, that was 6 gallon. You know, we're putting in dollars worth was 3 gallon.
Yeah.
So those days were past.
Was that back when you didn't pump your own gas, even if you were a trucker?
No. The attendant pumped the gas in those days.
Yeah.
I don't think the self-service came around too much until, what, the early 70s, maybe?
Maybe, I don't know, that's a good
Of course,
question.
the high-price gas started in April of 1973.
Yeah.
That's when all that started, and here we are, April 18, so how many years ago has that been?
Yeah.
Quite a few, huh?
27,
I was in the
37,
car
45
business
years.
then, and
45 years.
yeah, I was in the car business then, and everybody thought the world was going
Yeah.
to end when gas went from 29 to 36 cents a gallon. Everybody wanted to trade their LGD Ford for a Pinto.
Yeah.
Oh, what a horrible time to be in the car business, but that's a different story.
Yeah. Right. Well, thanks for taking time out to tell us about your experiences trucking.
Not a problem. It's been
Anything else you want to cover?
I'll just kind of glance into my quick notes here to see if there's something else that might be of interest. Oh, yeah. Yeah, here's something of interest. And you hit on it just briefly. Regulation.
Yeah. And deregulation.
And deregulation. Well, maybe some people don't know what we're talking about here. But prior to the late 70s, I don't know, 76 or 70.
I think it was 76, and it took a couple of years to really fully implement, so
Yeah.
latter half of the 70s.
I was not in the business at that time. I was selling cars and motorcycles at that time, so I was out of it at that time. But prior to that, there was what we called the regulation. And so if you had operating authority, say, for your trucking company, and your authority would be limited to certain commodities and even on certain highways. Like you could maybe do steel from St. Louis to Chicago on 66, but you couldn't do steel to Indianapolis on US 40, for an example, or vice versa. And so you got a load that's going someplace that you don't have enough authority for that product or those roads or whatever. So you would do what we call a trip lease or an interline with a company that did have. And so you'd have to go by their office and do a contract to lease to them for that trip. And the copies of fuel permits, and then you'd also have to have their name and all of their information with their ICC numbers and DOT numbers and fuel numbers and all that stuff. And take a piece of masking tape and tape that on the side of your truck. And then a different logbook now, because you're running under somebody else's operating authority.
Yeah.
And what a hassle that was.
And where would you get checked? Way stations for that kind of thing?
Yeah, way stations may check you
Yeah.
and check your information.
Yeah.
And certain states, like Mississippi, they would check your fuel, come in with a stick and see how much fuel you had when you come into the state, and see how much fuel that you had when you went out of the state, and how many miles that you drove, so they knew how much fuel that you used, so they know how much tax to charge you for.
Really?
So that was a hassle during the regulation.
Yeah.
After deregulation, of course, a lot of that changed and everything became much simpler. And then on the fuel situation, as I mentioned, then in the late 80s, 87, 88, in that area someplace, we came with what we called IFTA, IFTA, which stood for International Fuel Tax Agreement. So now you just had one little sticker about the size of a credit card, and a number on it, and a year, and that kind of told all these other states that you were part of this international program.
You were good to go.
Yeah, and so then when you did your fuel tax report every quarter, and you had to list every state that you traveled in, how many miles that you traveled in each state, how many gallons of fuel that you bought every place in that quarter, and how many miles you traveled every place in that quarter, and then break it down by state, and break it down by how many miles that you drove, and your average miles per gallon, and how much fuel that you used, and how much fuel that you bought. And then that was all went into your home state, and then your home state dispersed and did all the adjustments to all the other states.
Wow.
Which made it a whole heck of a lot easier than it was before.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the one company that I worked with, they had a girl that her full-time job was nothing but fuel tax and permits.
Yeah.
For about 40 trucks.
Wow.
And that was a full-time job.
Yeah.
So all that changed, and that made it a lot easier. Of course, the people that, prior to that, those people, some of those guys paid a lot of money for some authority. They bought out another company just to get their authority.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe that authority was worth maybe $50,000 even back in those years.
Yeah.
And today you wouldn't get $50 for it.
Yeah.
You go get your own.
So deregulation was a big thing.
Yeah, it made it a whole lot easier. But some, like say, some companies have paid big prices for it, so they weren't too happy. But overall, it was much, much better for the whole industry.
Yeah.
And then too, back in those days that we're talking about too, in the 60s and so forth, and the freight rates were about 30 cents a mile. Is about what we would normally end up with. Maybe after the company took their cut, maybe we might end up with about 30 cents. And the driver might, if he drove for somebody else, he might end up with 7 to 8 cents a mile. And even in 1980, Prime was only paying $10 on the first driver and $9 on the second. So a total of 19 cents.
Wow. So you're on your way from Texas to Indiana, so I'm guessing the wanderlust hasn't gotten out of your system yet.
No. No. As my wife says today, she said, gee, it should be fun to go back to Alaska again. It would be fun to go to California again. Would you want to go? And I'd probably look at my watch and ask her if she's ready. No.
So you still have that basic wanderlust?
Oh yeah, I still love to go.
Just love to get out and go.
Our car out here is 4.5 years old, got 95,000 on it.
Oh boy.
Brother Jim that you just met, his car's got is 3.5 years old and got 17,000. So
Okay.
I still like to go, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but we go into Texas to spend the winter, not necessarily to get out and make a big trip. But,
Yeah. That's still a pretty long haul.
Oh yeah.
You get down to what, McAllen and Far?
You're close, a little bit to the east of there, over toward Harlingen and Brownsville.
Yeah.
Just 45 miles from where you're talking about.
Yeah.
Usually spend the winter down there.
Yeah. So you've driven a truck to all 48 states?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Do you have a favorite state?
Depending upon if you're talking about seeing the scenery or if you're talking about the road conditions or...
Well, how about, for both of those, road conditions
road conditions you don't want to spend your time in the United States of Texas.
They do a pretty good job.
Oh, Texas got the best roads in the world. Oh, by far. County roads is as good as Missouri's interstates are.
Really?
Good roads, and maybe if you're on a 2-lane and you come up behind another car and you kind of like to pass, if there's any kind of a shoulder, they've got to pull right off on the shoulder and let you by.
Really?
So you may be running 3 abreast on the 2-lane highway. That's not irregular.
Really?
And of course, about the first time I ever did that with my wife with me, she wasn't used to that. Thought I'd gone crazy. What are you doing? Run off the road? No, baby.
So you kind of pass by straddling the center line.
Yeah, and most of the shoulders is just about wide enough that you just barely have to do the center line.
Really?
Good roads, good people.
So in terms of scenery, what's your favorite state?
Oh, I suppose we'd have to go to Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, and Northern California as far as scenery is concerned. You'd have to go to
Great
the
Northwest.
Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Beautiful country. Nice people, but I kind of get tickled once in a while. You know, you talk to people up there and you say, gee, this is a pretty country that you got. And you know what the answer is going to be. They're going to say, oh yeah, but you know, it rains a lot. But if you get next to those people, what they're really trying to tell you is, yes, it's beautiful. Yes, we love it. And stay home.
You're welcome to visit, but don't come move here.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. You're welcome to come, but we got all the people we need right there.
Kind of that way about the Ozarks too, you know? It's like,
Two of those old trucks back in those years, you didn't order one like you'd order it today. The older stuff, you'd order the cab and chassis and so forth with maybe the engine and transmission that you wanted and the color that you want. And then the dealer would put the saddle tanks on it, put the air compressor on it to run the air over hydraulic brakes. We didn't talk about those, but the earlier ones was air over hydraulic. Okay, so put the air system on and bolt the fifth wheel on. And most of the time, a lot of times, the fifth wheel will take a piece of oak 2x4 and lay that on the frame, set the fifth wheel on it with 4 U-bolts. 4 U-bolts.
that's what's holding it on.
That's what holds it on. Excuse me. Remember one trip there, I got into a bad spot, excuse me, and I'd missed a turn and got off on a narrow road, and it was very steep, and I had on a bridge beam that was like 60 or 70 feet long, and was hanging away over the back end of the trailer on a permit load. And had to go about 10 miles before I could find a place to turn that thing around. You couldn't turn it around in a farmer's driveway, it was too long.
Yeah.
And I finally found a place, and I'd come across a couple of 5-ton bridges, and I was weighing over 50,000. And finally I found a place I could get turned around and came back up, and I had it just as fast as it would run. I thought, if we're going to fall in that bridge, the tractor and me is going across. We don't know about that bridge beam and the trailer if it's coming or not, but we're going to get across.
Right.
And then started up that steep hill. And this one had an Oldsmobile engine and a little GMC truck. And your range was from 3,200 to 3,800 on the tachometer. That was your range. You got down to 3,200, you shift the gears.
Yeah.
Your new trucks, you get down to 1,200 and shift gears, or maybe 1,000.
Yeah.
But anyway, hit that long steep hill, and the little tachometer just unwind, and you grab another gear, and you just keep unwinding. You still got a lot of hill, and you think, we're going to bust a boulder mount. We're going to put it, is the engine going to raise up and go into the fan, or the fan into the radiator, and we're going to bust the universal joint, or twist the universal joint out of the drive shaft. You got all that running through your mind. Got down in that very last gear, and she bounced off the governor just a time or two and got a hold and kept pulling the old tachometer just down and down, just keep falling down. And, you know, even your car will normally idle about 650 RPMs is about your idle in a car or in a truck, either one. Got down there at about 700, and she's a shaking and vibrating, and just to carry on and just bear the top of that hill. I think that hill would been another 50 feet. I don't think it would have made it. got up to a little wide spot where I could park in a restaurant. Got to walk around and look at my equipment, and it had pulled so hard that she'd slid the fifth wheel back on the frame and it bent the U-bolts right back over the spring hangers.
Really?
And moved that fifth wheel almost 4 inches, just stretched those bolts that bad. So we had to push the new bolts out in the morning. That was a hard pull.
Wow.
And later years got to doing a lot of oversized and farm machinery, and that's another experience too. A lot of times you were...
Oh, you'd carry oversized loads.
A lot of them in the later years.
Do you always have a, whatever they call it, a car going with you?
Rare.
Really?
Rare. It usually didn't get quite that wide, but...
You just have to put the wide load.
Wide load signs and the signs and everything like that. And you're supposed to do permits, but some states you'll learn that it's too much hassle to do permits. You just ride and guide some places. Like Oklahoma, for an example.
Yeah.
Or, well, not Oklahoma.
I just saw some wide loads coming here today, going through Lebanon. Some big, I don't know, big tank, big.
We've been seeing those big tanks for a couple of years coming through here.
I don't know what they're not. I don't think they're the wind generators.
No, not the tanks wouldn't be, no.
But some
we've
kind
been
of
seeing those big tanks and the wind generators.
And they had the Lebanon police were escorting them through, and
Yeah.
they knew enough that those were big, tall, even, and they knew how to work around the lights, so they wouldn't hit the stop lights.
Yeah, watch all of that.
Yeah. So, well, thanks again for a lot of good stories, a lot of good information about.
It's been good. I enjoyed
trucking. Yeah.
Been kind of fun reminiscing.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, been fun.
Thank you very much.
Sorry to welcome.
We've been talking with Don Robinson at his brother's home in Lebanon, Missouri.